Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us once again today. On behalf of the Shangsheng School of Tibetan Medicine, I thank you so much. On our show, we explore Tibetan medicine's contribution to the greater conversation of global public health today and its role in the rich cultural heritage of traditional healing arts and sciences from all around the world. We offer programs online and in person, everything from short courses, continuing education courses for healthcare providers, all the way through our flagship program, our full-length 4-year advanced study of traditional Tibetan medicine. So if you're interested in learning more about our programs or checking out some of our publications and content, learning more about our founder, Chogyal Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche, please do join our email list. We'll keep you informed and we'd love to collaborate with you. We'd love to connect on Facebook, and you can check out any of our past episodes of this video program on YouTube or on our website, TibetanMedicineSchool.org. So click the bell and for sure leave some comments. We'd love to hear from you. So today on our show, we welcome one of today's leading voices in the field of healing-centered education, Dr. Angel Acosta. With unique experience and innovative tools, Dr. Acosta offers insights into the work of community healing and group process. Today, we'll discuss practical methods of collective healing, explore connections between social justice work, community trauma healing, and modern public health worldwide. To give you a little background about our guest today, Dr. Angel Acosta is a celebrated luminary with decades of experience in the fields of healing-centered education, mindfulness practice, and social justice work. His work develops educational leadership and empowers communities with innovative tools for collective healing and wellness. As always, our ongoing host and school director, Menpa Punsak Wangmo, is a practitioner and teacher of traditional Tibetan medicine with over 30 years of experience. Menpa Wangmo is the director of the Shangsheng School of Tibetan Medicine and the co-founder of the United States Tibetan Medicine Professional Organization, the American Tibetan Medical Association, ATMA. Menpa Wangmo, thank you so much for hosting our show as always. And Dr. Acosta, it's truly a delight to have you with us. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Wonderful. All righty. Well, so our guests and our hosts are coming from the East Coast today, where it's been a little cold and even snowing in some areas. And my name, by the way, is Adam Okerblom. I'll be your moderator coming to you from the San Francisco Bay Area. So Dr. Angel, thank you once again for being with us. And today we're going to talk about some of the foundational themes and practical methods of your work with healing-centered education. And I know that a big component of that is contemplative practice and mindfulness and different sort of mind-body exercises that relate with that. So if you would like to kind of open our discussion today with a quick exercise to ground us into this moment, we'd be very appreciative.
Yes, yes, yes. Such a pleasure to be here with Sister Mempa and you, Adam. I would love to just start our conversation with a short grounding practice. We know that meditation and mindfulness and contemplative practices are part of human tradition. We've been able to deploy all kinds of practices to get centered, whether it be closing your eyes, whether it be walking, whether it be cooking, whether it be eating, whether it be in relationship. So what I'd love to do is just provide a slowing down. So wherever you are now, seated on your chair, your couch, your bed, you may be walking, listening. Just take a moment to slow down and sense into your body, your seated body, your walking body. And if you feel comfortable, go ahead and gently close your eyes. If you'd like to keep your eyes open, you can kind of hold a soft and gentle gaze away from the screen. Just beginning to gently sense into this beautiful body that does so much to keep us alive. Sense into the natural rhythm of your breath. Feeling that chest rise as you inhale. Feeling that chest descend as you exhale. Just sensing into your position, seated, standing, laying down. Just take a moment to sense into the majesty of this body of yours. Taking a few more gentle, deep breaths. Taking one more gentle, deep breath. And as you exhale, just slowly, gradually open your eyes, sense into the room that you're in, sense into your relationship to this moment. Unfortunately, we talk to you through this digital channel, but we are still connected, and it is a pleasure to be here to have this conversation. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. I always love it when we're able to do a quick, short practice at the beginning, because it really helps me out to ground into the experience. So thank you so much. So today we're discussing kind of some of the foundational theory and the actionable practices of healing-centered education. And this really just strikes me as such important work for our society today, because in the different spiritual practices that I've studied, the healing sciences from Tibet, China, the spiritual practice of Buddhism, different things from around the world, there's core foundation theory, core ideas that can really help open up our consciousness and enrich our own experience in life and give us the potential for increased health and happiness for ourselves and the community. And then there's actionable practices like breath work, simple exercises that also can really kind of drive those theoretical lessons home. And it seems to me if we can integrate that into the institutional systems in which our society works, our schools, maybe our work, different institutions of education, and just in our modern life, the earlier the better. I think that this can be so helpful to normalize and just further integrate these awesome lessons into our society as a whole to work from the ground up. So can you please give us just an introduction to healing-centered education and just share whatever you'd like to share about, the foundations of that?
Yeah, and this is a great opportunity to meld this notion of healing-centered education with the long legacy of the healing arts in our cultures, and Tibetan medicine being one very strong lineage in the healing arts. So just thank you for having me, and I'm excited about this conversation. One thing to note is that this notion of healing-centered education is relatively new. As a conceptual framework, it is relatively new. In fact, the notion of healing-centered education really only enters the academic and public discourse within the last couple of years. However, over the last 5 to 10 years, you have this notion of healing-centered engagement, healing-centered engagement. And that comes out of youth development work and helping young people with understanding and trauma and understanding how to be resilient in the face of school systems that oftentimes struggle to meet their needs. So we want to credit Dr. Sean Ginwright. Dr. Sean Ginwright is one of the leading scholars in healing-centered engagement. He actually coined the term healing-centered engagement. So as you're thinking about healing-centered education, you want to acknowledge the incredible work that he has done. He wrote a wonderful book in 2016-17 called Hope and Healing in Urban Education, Reclaiming Matters of the Heart. It was a fascinating text, inviting us to take seriously this notion of healing in the context of educational policy, educational practice, and educational philosophy. So major contribution. And I think it's important to note that the reason why healing-centered engagement and healing-centered education are important and are actually gaining popularity is because we are experiencing unprecedented levels of interlocking crises. Obviously, the pandemic, income inequality and social inequality, climate change and the disequilibrium that comes with living in a finite planet, the police brutality that is evidenced across the country. This week was a very rough week. And when it comes to collective trauma, there was a shooting in Indianapolis. So shooting, whether it be in schools or in communities, in the United States specifically, but globally as well. So we are going through a lot as a society, as a country in the United States. So healing-centered education primarily, what it does, it allows us to shift from a trauma-informed approach. Trauma-informed teaching and trauma-informed pedagogy was an incredible contribution to understanding how people and students learn and how they're impacted by trauma on an individual and collective level. So thank you to all the scholars who have contributed to trauma-informed teaching. We do need to know how the brain and the body are impacted by trauma. But the contribution of healing-centered education is that it shifts the focus slightly, because if we maintain the focus on trauma, then all we see is traumatized people. And we know that people are resilient, and people are not just their trauma. Students are not just their trauma. So the healing-centered turn is an attempt to weave trauma-informed teaching, to weave in social emotional learning, helping students develop pro-social skills like teamwork, forgiveness, collaboration. So social emotional learning, mindfulness. So channeling mindfulness, combining mindfulness in the process of education. Restorative justice, finding more restorative approaches to discipline, more restorative approaches to understanding conflict. So the healing-centered education paradigm is actually composed of multiple sub-paradigms. So in a sense, its name is new, but its manifestation has been actually happening for a while, right? Holistic education is part of the healing-centered paradigm. Culturally responsive teaching is part of the healing-centered and restorative paradigm. So all that to say is that the concept is new, but there's been a momentum building. And the last thing I'll say in terms of principles, you want to draw on and from Dr. Sean Wright's framing of healing-centered education and healing-centered engagement, that some of the principles of healing-centered education are, one, that healing is culturally grounded, right? So, for example, in the Tibetan tradition, the work that Mempa does, that you do, Adam, is grounded in Tibetan culture, but it can inform in a variety of human communities, but it's grounded on the accumulation of knowledge based in the Tibetan tradition. So healing is culturally grounded. So every community has their own way of wrestling with restoration. The second thing is that we need to tend to the healing of practitioners, whether it be teachers, whether it be leaders. Oftentimes, teachers and leaders are on the ground doing the work, teaching, leading, and they don't get the right supports to build on their resilience, to build on their capacity to continue to do the work. So another core principle is that we must support the caregivers and the practitioners with supportive, healing spaces for them to actually find restoration and for them to fill up their own cup. The last principle, and there are many others, is that actually healing is deeply political work. You see, you cannot romanticize healing in the sense that it's disconnected from some of the structures that actually cause the harm and the trauma in the first place. So it's deeply political work. So if you're engaging in collective healing and collective trauma restoration, you have to talk about the system, in the case of racism, the system of racial inequality, in the case of gender, the system of gender violence and masculinity. So those are just some core philosophical and grounding principles of both healing-centered engagement and healing-centered education. The last thing I'll say is that it is a inspirational and aspirational framework, because right at the time where we experience the emergence of such a framework, we also experiencing dark and bleak circumstances in our global society. So it's a fascinating time to both hold the tensions and crises that are unfolding before us, and also find language that will give us the energy to actually get excited about solving or responding to the very crises I mentioned earlier. So just wanted to say all of that and humbly say that we're still figuring out what this means. And that's why I was excited to come here, because I know the Tibetan tradition has had, more than a century of curating wisdom around the healing arts. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Angel. Wow. Wow. I mean, I have to say that the articulation of some of these core themes is just really, it speaks to me. It's a fantastic way of presenting some of these, because you're dealing with very large topics that are, in many cases, the whole world and the whole human experience. And, you're saying that this is kind of a new and fresh, science in terms of the organization in the modern science. And, I personally love modern science, and I love the power of social science or biological science or every kind of the modern technology to have this kind of delineation of things and organization and structure, and to describe our world in this very structured and clear and precise way. It's very powerful, and I love that. But then again, you talked about the sort of dichotomy. I'm also completely immersed in the love of kind of the universal principles and the amorphous kind of nature of spiritual practice and all of that. So to see someone like yourself kind of presenting these beautiful wisdom themes and articulating them into kind of the context of modern social science in such a effective and descriptive and powerful way, I really appreciate it a whole lot. So thank you for that.
Thank you. No, thank you so much.
So you mentioned So, a lot of this work with education, of course, will center around young people and the youth. And I think that every generation, as we get a little older, we really hold out a lot of hope that the young generation will be empowered somehow to really kind of take us a big step forward and really help to, save the day and sort of maybe pick up some of the pieces that we were not able to carry as well as we would have liked to. I know that's
Mhm,
true when I examine my own work, and I think a lot of people feel that way. So when we talk about young people, there's always a lot of pressure for young people in school, across the boards, and especially in any sort of, challenged situation, challenged economically, challenged with, political, social challenges, and all this kind of condition, or in areas of conflict in many ways. So it's tough to be a kid, and there's pressure to conform. There's pressure to be cool, there's pressure to be popular, there's pressure to be
mhm,
a tough guy or to be attractive, or all these kind of things. So when
mhm,
you talked about building in resiliency and building in tools to help young people deal with these kind of things in a more constructive and appropriate and helpful, healthy way, that really I think is so important. So it reminds
mhm,
me of something I heard you speak about recently in another interview, which was social emotional learning, and kind
mhm,
of expanding the scope of what we can teach and how we can like define ourselves, like our intelligence and our capacity in terms of a more compassionate or a more community integrative way, so we can get beyond some of these limiting kind of tropes that people turn to buffer their experience, trying to be cool,
mhm,
trying to be tough, these kind of
mhm,
toxic masculinity, whatever it is.
mhm,
So I was
mhm.
hoping you could tell us a little bit about social emotional learning and the definition of an expanded scope of intelligence and kind of what that
Mhm.
means.
Yeah, yeah. Mm. Yeah, social and emotional learning, many of you know this, really comes out of the 90s, the 1990s. A lot happened in the 90s. Um, what you want to know is that a lot of thinkers in the field of education began to open up what we were meaning by intelligence. For so long, the notion of IQ was reigning supremely in terms of sorting and categorizing human intelligence. And I believe Howard Gardner was from Harvard, was one of the first, one of the many, but initial scholars to comprehensively begin to invite us to think about all kinds of different intelligence: musical intelligence, visual intelligence, mathematics, not just intellectual. And then folks like Daniel Goleman, Dr. Daniel Goleman, um, he wrote the book, Emotional Intelligence and Social Intelligence, at around the same time, 96, 97. And that book was profound in terms of allowing us to think about social intelligence and emotional intelligence as crucial in an education context, but also his work impacted the business field. And there are many principles within that whole framework. One of them was that part of social and emotional intelligence was self-awareness. Self-awareness, being able to be aware of how you were feeling, and also attuned, an empathic attunement with the other. So self-awareness, be able to connect with the other, um, and then almost in a way, an ability to respond and engage in a kind of a resonance with the other. And through that process, you will become more socially intelligent, more emotionally intelligent. And that was a practice, a methodology, and an approach, which is promising because IQ was so fixed, uh, and social emotional learning provided the opportunity for people and students to actually build that capacity. And if you take the social emotional learning paradigm of an attempt to teach students and adults how to articulate their emotions, how to expand upon them, how to navigate difficult emotions, how to articulate one's needs in the context of relationship and conflict. That paradigm and way of approaching education was also deeply informed by the findings in neuroscience. So, for example, at around the same time and across the last 20 years, we have learned that the brain has this thing called neuroplasticity, that the brain itself can actually grow, not physically, but in terms of the neurosynaptic connections that form new thoughts, new habits, new behaviors. So, social emotional learning was an incredible, and still is an incredible opportunity to develop social emotional skills, but also to actually increase the brain's growth across the lifespan. So in terms of how we use it in schools, in terms of how we use it in our businesses, it has been an incredible tool to foster empathy, to cultivate compassion. And I can't think of another time in our history where we need such practices and approaches. So that's how I understand social emotional learning.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and it's amazing how, you mentioned that in recent decades we've made incredible scientific breakthroughs in neuroscience and studying the way the brain works and the way the nature of our consciousness from a modern science perspective, which of course in traditional sciences and medicine, the study of consciousness has been profoundly and exhaustively researched and applied for millennia. But it's amazing how the more modern science learns about our neuroanatomy and our the nature of our mind, the more we start hearing about the importance and the emphasis on themes like interconnectivity, empathy, compassion, working with emotions, dealing with trauma. It's just incredible how we can come full circle to these kind of what you would call spiritual and philosophical themes. And personally, I'm so happy to see that every time. I find it really inspiring.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All righty. So in a little while, I want to move on and hear from Menpa Wangmo. But before we do, Dr. Angel, can you introduce us a little bit to kind of some of the nuts and bolts, some of the actionable practices that go into this kind of work, and just tell us a little bit about how you would work with group process and implementing some of these themes in your practice?
Yeah. So, as I said in my opening remarks around healing-centered education, its conception is new as far as language and discourse around the topic. But like Tibetan culture and many other cultures and many other educational paradigms, we've been talking about this for a while. So, thinking about restorative circles, restorative circles have been used in indigenous communities for millennia. In fact, there's the organization Bioneers has a wonderful podcast on indigenous approaches to peacemaking and some of those peacemaking strategies as social technologies for reducing conflict. So again, in terms of practices and nuts and bolts, you can find a variety of examples across many communities. I'm thinking about the work of Thomas Hubel. Thomas Hubel, a wonderful mystic and thinker, wrote a book on healing collective trauma that was just published in November. And for example, in that work, he talks about collective trauma healing and individual trauma healing. And in that methodology, part of what needs to happen in a group is that there has to be kind of enough slowing down as a community to talk through the cultural fault lines, or where the places that there's tension or hurt and harm, and then create what he calls coherence, and resonance. So in the expression of how harm has taken place and people receiving that, there is resonance. In going deeper into the conversation, into the collective space that's being held there, and more exploration of the nuances of the conflict or the nuances of the trauma, there is a sense of coherence. And through a deep process like that, where there's resonance, where there's coherence, where people are heard, then you create the condition for some trauma resolution. So that takes the form of restorative circles, conflict mediation, creating time in your classroom or in your workspaces to actually process some of the difficult dynamics that are unfolding in the classroom or in the workplace. For example, this week was really intense with the case of George Floyd and the murder of Dante Wright in the same city, and the shootings in Minneapolis. So creating space to resonate and to feel into what does it mean to live in a society that has such level of, you could say, chaos right now, and creating the conditions for those conversations to happen. So depending on which modality or tradition you're drawing from, in that case, Thomas Hubel, in the case of restorative justice, for example, when there's a conflict, let's say in the classroom or in school or in a workplace, you have a restorative circle and you actually sit down with the person who was hurt, and you sit down with the person who was kind of quote unquote the person harming, and you create space for dialogue between them with a supportive structure around them and safety around them in order to get some clarity around what happened, but also to provide accountability and restoration. So in terms of the nuts and bolts, it'll really depend on which tradition you're drawing from. But fundamentally, it's the practice of slowing down in community to address things, phenomena, dynamics that usually go unaddressed, that accumulate over time, that end up being suppressed, and that actually, in the short and long run, cause harm, psychological, emotional, and spiritual. So I have to slow down myself because there's so much. There's just so much that I'm learning about this process. But I point people to Thomas Hubel's work, Healing Collective Trauma. I point people to the work of restorative justice and healing justice as well. I point people to the work of collective recovery with the Dr. Mindy Fullilove over at the New School. And I'll come back a little later with maybe some more nuts and bolts. Yeah.
So the theme of restorative justice, would you say that this is kind of shifting from a more punitive mindset into a more problem-solving and reconciliatory mindset just across the boards?
Yeah, I mean, partly, yeah. Restorative justice comes out of an attempt to reform the prison system, and in an attempt to also reform the penal code in schools. traditionally, and still the case, many schools would suspend students for all kinds of disciplinary infractions. And unfortunately, what the data revealed is that the suspension of students had a direct connection to the prison system. More importantly, that the number of students of color who were being suspended was disproportionate to other students, especially white students. So you created this really dysfunctional system, which led to scholarship around the school to prison pipeline. So that restorative justice really is an attempt to have a more restorative process where the detention, suspension, expulsion are mediated through a restorative process, whereas as opposed to suspending a student and exiling them from the community, you actually put that student at the center to meet everyone's needs. So yes, to your point.
Thank you. Yeah. What you're explaining, it reminds me a lot of, I'm drawing a correlation between the work we do with our individual health and medical systems, and then this kind of societal work as well. Because when we're working medically with our own health, then if we have some sort of problem or conflict that's arising in a elemental system or a physiological system, and then if we kind of attempt to encapsulate that or ignore it or kind of push it away, or if we attempt to, like forcibly expel that and sort of hit it with, for example, really strong pharmaceutical drugs or some really invasive technique, then this really cannot be the optimal way to treat that disease. It can really have a rebound effect. It can, proliferate in that way. But instead, what we really need to do is pay closer attention to it and find out the nature of why this is happening, what are the related causes, and holistically what is causing this imbalance, and then sort of correct it in a gentle and nurturing and attentive way, and just applying more intelligence to that. Of course, in order to do that, we have to be investing time and energy into that. The reason why your Western doctor, when you go in, can't really sit down and help you with your diet and lifestyle, help you with your mental, emotional state, give you profound personalized advice, is usually not because they don't want to, they would love to, but it's because they're too busy. They have, 9 minutes with you, and then they must move on to get the bills paid from insurance. So you have to kind of invest more time and energy on your health individually to develop an appropriate holistic response and really solve that problem in that way. And personally, I see it in the same way societally. If it's just easier to suspend kids, if it's easier just to lock people up and to try to forget about them, in the short term, but then this problem can proliferate. It never goes away. In fact, it gets much, much worse. So I really appreciate you bringing some clarity around that. And thank you again for everything you've shared so far, Dr. Angel.
Mm-hmm. Just to quickly add a couple more resources around everything you just said. For example, some of the indigenous grandmothers from the Lakota Sioux Nation. There's this wonderful book called Somatic Archaeology. And it's incredible work of engaging in somatic practices, body kind of sensorial practices that allow you to engage in an excavation of where trauma lives in your body. So just really powerful. So I just want to note that there, that somatic archaeology, people like Solana Booth and Robin, and her last name escapes me. But another very important methodology there, for those of you who are looking for methodologies and approaches for holistic, deep exploration of your own trauma and healing.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing these really great resources. And we'll plug all these into the comments, into our show notes. And everybody tuning in, please do check out some of these awesome resources. In fact, the book, the work of Thomas Hubel, we've had that mentioned a couple times before on our show. And I personally haven't had a chance to check it out yet, but it seems to be a really pivotal work. A few of our guests working with trauma and psychology and whatnot have pointed us in that direction. So we should probably go for it.
Hmm.
Okay, wonderful. All right, well, thank you, Dr. Angel. So I want to come back in a little bit and delve into some more of this. And for now, I want to move and talk to Menpa Punsak
Hmm.
Wangmo, our
Hmm.
show host and our school director. Menpa Wangmo, thank you so much for being with us today. How are things in your area? Did you mention it's snowing in your town today?
Yes, big snow.
Well, Menpo Wangmo, so today we're talking, we've been talking about this kind of group and community and collective health and healing practices beyond just the individual. And I really appreciate everything that Dr. Acosta is sharing with us because, as you know, Menpo Wangmo, we've had many guests on our show who have really been sharing some awesome resources for our own personal healing. And many times we really talk about ourselves in terms of, my health, my vitality, my own personal trauma. I'm so traumatized. I need to heal. I need to be better. And of course, everybody has these kind of ideas and it's wonderful to delve into that. But we don't want to have like an egotistical or overly one-sided or dualistic view of healing. We don't want to be neglecting to remember the whole world around us, because if we're disconnected from that, then how could we possibly have good health, really? So I wanted to ask you to comment a little bit, because in the tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, we have this very important concept that relates with the community and the group and the connection and the power and the potentiality that can come from working in a group experience. And that is the concept of the Sangha in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. So if you please, can you introduce the idea of Sangha? Tell us your ideas about what it means for this conversation, and just talk about how, what are your ideas about Tibetan Buddhism's core views of like working in the community and community healing.
Thank you. Thank you. First, I want to say thank you, Doctor. Such wonderful. Really, I learned a lot. And then also, even I'm working as healing in the healing field over 30 years. But, in the Tibetan medicine, we say is like a member, men and the member. So listening your topic, I really understood, okay, this is the mean of this one. So thank you. I want to say thank you. Yes, Adamla, your question. And number one is Sangha is sort of like more sort of like we talk like the people who has the similar tensions, follow certain teachings. That group we call is like a Sangha. But it means is another type of like a community. In general, when we're talking like the community, meaning of the community or sense of the community, since we are social animal, we all need the social support. And also what I see this, that the community, sense of the community or sense of the Sangha give us a security of our life. If I don't have food enough, I can go to my Sangha next to my door, knock the door, and then I get food there. If I need like a health issue, I have some problems, I knock another door and ask them to help. So this is like that the sense of the simple part of the sense of the Sangha. So if we have this kind of community, and then that bring us is like our life is more secured. today I see in the novel day, because we are somehow is through these devices, we are internationally connected, but it comes down to the individual part is we are really is a little bit isolated. And then in particular, since we lock down, as we know, and then many people having hard time, what that telling us, without community, without a friend, without a family, is we're not going to do well. Physical not doing well, emotional not doing well. Once the emotional not do well, then the physical is a part of that because the mind and the body is interrelated. So none one is doesn't function, the other one's not going to do well. So for this kind of reason, is what that means is that the sangha and then the community is how important a part of that. An example, if we are traveling to cross ocean through a boat, the sangha is whose people, those people who sitting in this boat, who has the tension idea, wants to safely get outside of that ocean. Inside that the boat, one people acting not behave well or acting strange, and the can cause is we all sunk into that ocean. So for that reason, is it often I remember is my teacher, the Namgyal Nobo Rinpoche, he always said is we do not need a revolution, we need evolution. Of course, if I tell someone you should change your behavior, you should do what I'm doing, it doesn't work because is background is different, health issue is different, you know, like we all have our own background knowledge, and then we all have each person has a mind or mental. What you like, I don't like. What I like, you may not really favor, willing to do. But as we try to understand importance, safe, happy of our society, I understand my behavior is going to contribute to my family, well-being of my family, well-being of my community, well-being of my city, and the bigger my one person's behavior can affect to the world. If we each of us we understand that, we try to you in charge of your own behavior. You are not in charge of the other people's behavior, but you in charge of your own behavior. Be as a meaning of the human life. You carry your own human life ahead. I think that will brings is a lot of good benefit. So that where we can build through the community, because as the community is like example, community is like a family. Is we have small family, the blood connected, medium siblings that are the community, and then we have little larger, then big global siblings, whatever the 7 billion or whatever this that the number of the human. Always His Holiness saying is that we all like the brothers sisters. So this the Tibetan like a meaning of the community or sangha, I personally feel is they gives us a more life is a security. So once we have our life is more secured, not like security from the insurance, you know. Insurance is today we have insurance is one part of, yes, but it's not this kind of security touching to the heart. So this I feel is that the meaning of the community.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Man Paula. And then thank you so much. So when we're talking about like the dimension of the individual and the dimension of the community and the interconnectedness, it brings to mind for me this very important idea in Tibetan medicine and in Tibetan Buddhism, which is kind of the nature of that dimension, how it works universally. And so we have this idea of three aspects of our body and our energy and our mind. And I was hoping you could just say something about that, just, because many times today it's very popular to talk about mind-body practice, mind-body connection, which is very powerful, wonderful idea. And this relates and in many ways comes from this older sort of more universal idea of the body, energy, and mind. So can you please just say something about this connection, and then what does it bring up for you for this conversation, the idea of body, energy, and mind?
Okay, so there is the body, mind, and energy is sort of like interrelated, like interdependent, these three. If there's only one, it's not going to happen. So always these three is like interdependent relationship. The Namkha Nobo Rinpoche's his book, The Birth, Life, and the Death. In this book, in the first page of the book, he's so like introducing his book. Here, there he said is that the body presented as a man riding a horse, but he is a limbless, a man. So no legs, no hands, sort of like no legs. The mind present as horse, but is blind. So the man wants to go. The man is that the presenting sort of like, sorry, I missed it. The man is that the mind presented as that the limbless. No, the man is presented like the limbless, so that is the body aspect. And then that the horse is present as like blind, so that is the body, and then this mind. The horse is that the blind, and the man is that the limbless. So what they do is that the mind wants to go, but is he need a vehicle, sort of like who carrying them. So that is he riding the horse. But horse is blind, so need a guide by the man. So when we look in this one is that the body and the mind, the body is like that the same like the blind, and the mind is that the body is like the limbless, and the mind is like the limbless. So the mind lead the body, and the body do whatever they wanted. So these two, like the body wants to go somewhere, they need the mind. So like mind say, and then they do. Mind wants to reach something, is in the mind need to coordinate with the body, and the body do the action. So these two sort of like that, the two interdependent. So only one is the blind horse not going to get anywhere, and then limbless man also not going to get anywhere. So these two is always need to be sort of like together all the time. One is not going too well, and then the effects to the other part. So for that reason is like there is sort of like interesting sort of like when we teaching now what we can do. So these two is like a interdependent need both. So what we can do, an example, your body you need to present as like the to know these kind of things, how should acting, how should behave, how should you collaborate well, is a number one is good to listen, good to observe what the mind wanted and what the body does not want it. So this observe well, because the mind is like a energetic, so never satisfied, always wanted. But the body is composed by the material five element. The body can consume, get tired, so on and so forth, but mind is not. For that reason is need to train the mind to learn, don't torture too much this blind poor horse. Horse can do certain things, of course, should do certain things because it's collaborating, but it don't do the over order. Even you want to order it, do a little gentle way. So then this is all parts of the teachings, the Buddhism teachings or the pre-Buddhism teachings. So when we're looking sort of like a teaching, Buddhism teaching is mainly try to training your mind. Also, His Holiness also he said that the science focusing more on the body things, and then the Buddhism philosophy is more focused on the mind, sort of like. So what we learn through the teaching, how should acting the mind, and then all like the meaning of the human life, everything's impermanent, to have a good satisfactions, all those kind of things we need to learn first, as we said before, the evolutions. Because today we're facing a lot of problems. Most of those problems is just we making by ourselves. No one made for us. The wild animal, no, they didn't do anything for us. And it's just within the human we are creating. We damage the natures, we damage the other beings, because our this even invisible sort of like this the tiny mind, even we can't see, but it's so powerful. If we're not able to train our mind is always sort of like starving, wanted more and more. This one His Holiness said is that our when we go to cities and then special like a modernized, how should I call this kind of like a big developed city, the construction building is coming higher and higher, but our conduct is going less and less. Our behavior is less and less. And then another hand is that the artificial knowledge is we are getting more and more, but the real conduct, mind knowledge is less and less. So then, since we have a good knowledge but is no wisdom, then we're creating a lot of problems to the to our circumstance. And then end is who losing, and the you, because you also losing, because you also in this samsara, you also part of this global family, you also living in this like under on this the motherland, and the end no one win, included you lose. So this I think is that the body mind energy, because is when we Tibetan medicine, when we're looking, there is a like long-term cause of the disease, short-term cause of disease. Long-term cause of the disease is that the three poison. If you're not able to control the three poison, then you will get its bigger problems. We cannot get out of the three poison, not bigger. Three poison is also part of our energy, but we need to know, acknowledge that, and then we need to learn how to learn the balance part. So this is, I think, is one of the best to addressing this one, is that the Buddhism teachings, and also physical part is like a diet, changing or training the breathings, training the exercise, all those kind of things, and help to harmonize. Because we need to harmonize yourself, your element, because it's outside five element, we get like a natural disasters, but also inside our own elements, also sometimes conflicting us and then causing a lot of problems. So we need individual harmonize, family harmonize, community harmonize, and then we try to promote that harmonize to bigger audience or bigger society, global harmonize. So I think that is. Did that make sense? Did I just say wrong?
Perfectly, it makes sense to me. Thank you, Genla. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Sometimes I'm worried I'm not answering your questions.
My Menpa Wangmola, my questions are simply just my weird idea to just kind of get the ball rolling for you.
Yeah.
The point is
Thank
you
you.
say what's important.
You.
Any potential guest on this show should know my question, it's not important to really stick with the exact question. You should really speak from your heart and speak from your inspiration. Well, Menpala, I have one more question for you for now before we go back to Dr. Angel. And so I wanted to say, so earlier today, Dr. Angel mentioned how how cultural wisdom, cultural sort of intelligence traditions come from deeply rooted in specific cultures that go back rooted such a long way, so many millennia in different parts of the world. And from there, then really that knowledge can spread around the world and other people can connect with that and share that. And I think that there is one extremely poignant example of this type of phenomenon is, of course, with the Tibetan people and Tibetan Buddhism, because the Tibetans came from this, wonderful, beautiful place, isolated for quite some time in many ways, and then have spread around the world because of reasons. And now they have this special thing. The Tibetan people have this kind of very special thing, which is their Buddhist practice and their Buddhism. And what happens once the people spread around to other areas and share this? Everybody is interested. Everybody wants to learn and connect with this. And so this can really have a lot of potential. So I have, in my studies, I've been working with you and with other teachers of Tibetan medicine and Tibetan Buddhism for many years now. And I've learned just a little bit about really some of the very difficult challenges that Tibetan people have faced. Tibetan people have faced the diaspora of leaving their ethnic homeland and going to other strange countries, learning different languages, having to integrate in entirely new societies, having such a profound disruption of their core culture and homeland because of reasons. And yet, through all this, whenever I have met Tibetan people, they have, of course, they have trauma, but they also have this beautiful wisdom that shines out. And that is the connection to this Buddhist practice that's rooted so deeply in the culture. They seem to have a remarkable capacity to connect as their family, as a community, maintaining values. There seems to be this global community where Tibetan people can all reach back and all together be connected to His Holiness, for example, and to just their culture in general. And so this is to me is a display of a powerful wisdom tradition in action that is working even in the modern times, even with the crazy challenges of today's world and the last century.
Will you
So
wait 1 second? Looks like
yeah.
it's working, so I will wait a few minutes.
Oh, there's something noisy. Okay. Alrighty, I think maybe they're shoveling snow or something. Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Angel, how are you doing? You hanging in there with us? How is this striking
Yeah,
you?
yeah. I just appreciate Mengpa in her own disposition as gentle force. She embodies the tradition and some of the ways that we should be gentle with ourselves in these trying times.
Thank you. Genla, everything okay?
Everything's good. I think they are working. So
Okay.
everything's good.
So I just wanted to ask you, what can you just share something briefly about how the Tibetan people's connection to the Buddhist Dharma is helping them to meet challenges and deal with trauma in a collective way, And then maybe what advice will you give to other people who are also facing challenges that maybe will help them in that sort of way?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah. So yes, as you said, it's we had quite challenging life. I think is many other people also, many other ethnicity also happened. When we're looking the history, is none of the history wasn't such a sweet. Of course, we sometimes sweet, sometimes a little sour. So this is sort of like, I think, also part of the life. The main thing for us is like when I was young, um, at the time we are pretty, poor at that time, but always the family, they tell us is that no matter what happened, you should not steal anything. If you do this kind of certain behave, which means you're going to lose your reputations. If you lose that, then all your capital money, sort of like if you're going to run a business, then you lost, which means you lost the sense of the human. And then it does not matter later how much money you have or which kind of knowledge you have, and then you're not able to go back into the society. So this kind of. In the meantime, also, no matter what happened, is the try to help others and also be kind to the others. So this kind of like the was the main topic to teaching when I was small. So they tell us is that your dignity is important. You should not lose your face. So this kind of. So that's somehow it really helped us. As you said, the Tibetan now is almost every country. There are some few Tibetans everywhere. But no matter where they are, which kind of jobs they're doing, which kind of capacity they have, but they're all like getting along with the co-workers, neighbors, and all these kind of things. I think they're doing very well. Because while we sort of like doing well, these kind of things, the unique is that the teachings by the families and also continuously teaching by His Holiness. So this is, I think, is the main reason. Another one also, this kind of help us. No matter what happened, we have like the hope. So we not losing the hopes because is everything impermanent. Like it was small and then grown up. So this kind of like everything impermanent between the small to the grown up, many things changed. Good changed, bad changed. It's all is like impermanent. So since the impermanent is positive or negative, can be changed both way. And if you keep your hope, and then can happen to some things, good things down the road. It's either you happened this life something good or not happened something good in this life, but you remember that the what is the meaning of the human. Meaning of the human is not only came for to find a food. We came into this world. Thank God we had the human life come to this. In the Buddhism, we say supreme beings, like supreme life. So since we have the supreme being's life, it's not only searching for food. It's more than something to do. The searching food also animal can do that very well. So this kind of like the teaching, I think that helped for us is no matter where we ending our life, where we like relocating our life. we keep the main sort of like a theme, main like idea need to be harmonized and try to help to the humanities or sentient beings. In case ABCD capacity issue, I cannot help to any other beings. Make sure don't harm to any other beings. So this is sort of like our commitment. So this, I think, is helping us because when we're learning what we said, the teachings you should thinking as like medicines. Who listen the teaching, you should acting or presenting as like a patient who sick. And the teacher, you presenting as like the sort of like the doctor. If I sick, I want to overcome, I go to see a doctor to get the advice from that. He gave a program for treatment. I should follow that. Then I chance to overcome. Same like that way to listen the teachings and to apply that. So I want to say all the people who has like the traumatized or life like a tough life, I would just want to say, just don't worry. Everything will change. Important is keep the hope and they keep your sense of the human. So that's I want to say.
Thank you, Menpala. Keeping the sense of the human, our humanity. Thank you so much for sharing your words. And I think you just articulated perfectly what I've been stumbling around trying to say. The real reason why I was so excited that we could invite Dr. Angel to be with us today, because as you said, this educator, the person who is teaching and offering education, is like a doctor. The students, people absorbing that knowledge, are like a patient. And the content of those teachings is like that medicine. And as we've all explored today, we have a great need for this kind of medicine healing across our society now. So thank you so much.
Mhm.
Let's go back to our special guest. Let's go back to Dr. Acosta. Dr. Angel, thank you so much. So we have some time left and I wanted to try and ask you a couple more questions. So
Mhm.
Dr. Acosta, in Tibetan, in Buddhist practice and in different spiritual traditions, we have a very high emphasis on the idea of interdependence,
Mhm.
interconnectedness.
Mhm.
And this is such a profound teaching and so foundational to a greater understanding of our role in the world. And earlier today, you mentioned the idea of the interlocking crises
Mhm.
facing our world today, how we have great global systemic issues of structural inequality,
Mhm.
economic inequality, systemic racism, neocolonialism, exploitation of the global south. There's all of these social justice and injustice issues. And this really must be directly connected with the looming crises of global climate change
Mhm.
and public health and safety and stability of people on our planet, since we're all just here on planet Earth together. So I thought maybe you could tell us a little bit more about the interlocking crises and how this might relate with the work that you're doing.
Yeah. I just wanted to acknowledge Sister Mengpa for just the gentle leadership she provides and embodying her initial suggestions of, being gentle to the body, being gentle with the mind, and slowing down, and the emphasis she put on community. In fact, some of the leading research on thriving. There's a lot of research looking at what are the conditions that need to be put in place for communities to thrive. And one of the elements is community. So one of the elements for people to experience the sense of flourishing and thriving is a robust community where they can feel comfortable and have a sense of belonging and where they can be themselves. So I just wanted to reinforce that idea that the community itself is a form of medicine. In terms of the interlocking crises, you know, it's a little overwhelming to think about all that we are tasked to do to gain a level of balance and harmony. You know, primarily the ecological crisis that's unfolding in light of us, you know, living in a way that is not sustainable to the carrying capacity of the planet. So thinking about that big issue of coping with, you know, climate change or environmental instability. At the core, that is the most important one, and I think that one may cause the most disruption. We're seeing it already with some of the major migrations because of droughts and because of other land erosion and ice caps melting. But I think even though that's the largest, it touches on something that really actually comes out of the Buddhist tradition, you know, in terms of being in right relationship with the earth. Many indigenous communities in the North American context talk about being in right relationship with nature. And specifically in North American indigenous communities, there's this notion of the 7 generations, the law of the 7 generations. And it's basically a simple principle whereby you act as though you are a steward of and supporting the sustenance of the world and your community, so that at least 7 generations in the future are taken care of or are kept in mind. So just think about that, just that we would behave in such a way that we would be stewards of this space we're living in, whether it be global or local, in a way that would sustain the livelihood of the next 7 generations, right? So think about how you would act if you were taken care of and you were making decisions based on the impact it would have on the next 7 generations. You would probably consume less. You would probably take care of nature. You'd probably take care of yourself. You'd probably take care of your neighbor in different ways. The one thing to add is that not only is the orientation here towards 7 generations into the future, but it also includes the 7 generations that came before. So our decisions are infused with 14 generations, thinking about the future and embracing the legacy of the last 7 generations. And just think about how much of a moral compass that is in terms of being in right relationship with each other, being in right relationship with nature. And I only say that in response to your question around the interliking crises, because that's the fundamental issue, is that we need a more robust ethical compass that would allow us to be in right relationship with Mother Nature, with ourselves, with our fellow neighbors, which cuts across all crises. So as opposed to spending time breaking down the multiple crises and the ones we haven't even seen yet, I'd rather just cut to what seems to be a common denominator across all of them in terms of our need to develop a more robust ethical compass and habits of mind, body, and spirit.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we're getting close to winding down today, Dr. Angel, what else would you like to share with our audience about, this general conversation we're having? What else comes to mind for you today?
I think Mengpa mentioned this notion, this idea of isolation, and how the pandemic has increased isolation. What you want to know is that, in the U.S. specifically, but it was a global movement in the 1960s. Very difficult time with the civil rights, the Vietnam War, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the assassination of Martin Luther King, the assassination of Malcolm X. It was a very difficult period. And part of that was the Cultural Revolution. And the Cultural Revolution in the United States was a very interesting phenomenon. And I think there's something happening again in a similar way. There's a cultural revolution happening now. And I know that Mempa said we don't need a revolution, we need evolution. So I think there is a cultural revolution happening now in terms of more and more people tending to, or trying to tend to their own healing, their own well-being. I mean, even the pandemic, the fact that many people had to take care of themselves in ways that they hadn't done before, created a renaissance in the wellness sector. So I would just say that it's an interesting time to think about new cultural values that center well-being, that center wellness, and that there is momentum, in that, in various ways, and that hope itself is a practice. Hope itself is a practice, and if any community can speak to this, is the Tibetan people, in terms of sustaining a level of hope in the face of exile and dislocation.
Thank you. Yes. Dr. Angel, one thing that I've heard you mention several times, both in past interviews and then today as well, is you've kind of had this call to the theme of slowing down.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something you've mentioned a lot. And this really strikes me because as Menpo Wangmo said, I think she quoted His Holiness the Dalai Lama, that, our skyscrapers are growing higher and higher, while sort of our conduct or our society is getting lower and lower. And what this brings to mind for me is kind of, in Tibetan medicine, we study things in terms of the 5 elements and the nature of the elemental nature of phenomena in the whole universe, both physically and intellectually and energetically. So our society very often has this really kind of yang energy, forward momentum kind of modern society. We're always grasping to leap into the future for the next new thing, to get ahead, to kind of climb to the top of the pyramid, to go higher and higher. We have a lot of attachment. We have a lot of personal goals and ambition, and a lot of emphasis on what's the next new thing and what can we get. And this elementally is kind of the more light and unstable and driven aspects of the elemental spectrum: fire and wind. A lot of fire and wind energy in American society and modern society in modern times, and less emphasis on the grounded, stable connection to the whole earth, the connection of that more of a water and earth element energy, that slower, more stable, more secure aspect, the more yin energy that would connect us to being rooted in the planet itself, the earth, rooted in caring for the sort of, figuratively, the soil of the garden that we're in, rooted in the whole lineage of past of our ancestry and our collective cultural heritage. And so when you say slowing down, it makes me think of all of these things. So before we finish today, can you just comment one more time and say what Why is it important that we slow down, and why does this come up for you in your work?
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to acknowledge something you said around some of the elemental energies. And I think what is being called forth as well on a broader level in terms of energy is the feminine energy, the feminine archetype. We know that patriarchy and masculinity has overwhelmed the structures of power, and so the relational, the nurturing, the compassionate, that kind of archetypal energy it's in need of balancing. So, and that's being felt all over. That there has to be some more, if you had to call it, feminine energy. And then in terms of slowing down, yeah, the last 100.5 years, we've seen exponential growth in technology. And as Mempo said, yet we still need to evolve socially and emotionally. And I think you only get that by slowing down. You only get the integration of the desire to thrust forward, and yet the need to stay grounded in connection to each other and to the needs of those who may be most vulnerable. You only get that by slowing down enough to actually sense into a sense of balance. So, you can't really talk about slowing down without talking about the political economy and the way that it's organized, understanding that capitalism has its benefits and its limitations. But many people are talking about what does it mean to redefine growth. Because as long as we define growth in a very particular way within a particular capitalist paradigm that prioritizes the accumulation of wealth and profit, there are benefits to that. And, we've definitely benefited from that, especially as a country, in terms of amassing so much wealth. But we know that there is poverty in wealth. There's incredible poverty in wealth and in having so much. So part of it is slowing down. Part of it is redefining what do we mean by growth, and it's hard. It's hard. It's a very different. But I think if we can create conditions for us to have slow conversations, non-judgmental ones, we can maybe engage in some nice innovation.
Nice innovation. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you. So Dr. Angel, thank you so much. And we're getting close to winding down. And just one more thing that I would like to just express my appreciation to you for. Thank you for you've mentioned a lot of the resources that have inspired you, a lot of the texts and your own teachers and your own inspiring resources. And I think that's a really important thing to do. So thank you for kind of going back and honoring the people who inspired you. It's always good to keep that in mind. Dr. Angel, if people want to learn more about your own programming and your courses, I know that you run courses, you have different kinds of content and teachings available. How do they connect with you, and what's coming up next?
Yeah, just go to drangelacosta.com and check out our events section or our training section. We have a really beautiful course that we'll be teaching in May on healing-centered education, a primer. So check that out. That's going to be, it's going to be so good, so good. We're going to go deep, and we're going to learn together because I'm still learning. I'm still figuring this thing out. So join us for that healing-centered education course. You can find more information at drangelacosta.com.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you again for joining us and taking some time to share with us. Menpo Wangmo, as we finish up, any last comments or anything else that comes to mind before we finish today?
Number one, I want to say thank you again to the doctor. It's such a wonderful your speech. It's really I learned a lot. For sure, many other people learn a lot. Just I want to ask people, the audience. We try to do 1 minute, maximum 5 minutes, like a meditation, one in the morning and one in the evening. Morning, when you do a meditation or whatever, or you just sit down and you're thinking yourself, you try to think is which kind of good things you would do today. So, because we are human special beings, so you think how I can help, how I can be harmonized. Help is it does not mean always other people's, yourself, your families, your communities. So you think what you can do today, you sort of like think yourself what you can do, what you would like to do. Evening comes, you try to do another 1 or 3 minutes, maximum five. You try to think is how many good things you done today, how many bad things you done today. So good things we need to develop, like a study, go to the elementary school, then middle school, then high school, so on and so forth. Then you get on the top of there, like a doctor. The negative things we need to, with negatives we have high up there without any paying tuitions or any learning or any under guiding. It automatically is up there. That part we need to get down. So overnight is not going to both. So, learn is need to go through the day by day. Also bad part also to reduce also not coming overnight. So evening you try to check like checklist how many jealousy you did, how many harsh speak you did, how many sort of like disrespect you did to the people. And then tomorrow morning you think, oh, yesterday I did 3 harsh speak. I try today don't do. Then I think this would be is useful. It helps for me. So I hope also other people help. So that's I want to say. Then I want to say thank you, everybody. Thank you, Adamla. Thank you, Matthew. And special thanks to all the listeners. That's I want to say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much. Our host, Menpa Punsak Wangmo, our special guest, Dr. Angel Acosta. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Please do check out Dr. Angel's content online, and please do join our email list and keep in touch with us on social media. We love to connect with you, and we are going to have some new exciting programs coming out soon. So please do keep in touch. My name is Adam Okerblom. We really appreciate you joining us today. This is the Shangcheng School of Tibetan Medicine, and we will see you next time.